Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. DIY Dad here. And having kids, every once in a while I get challenged to do a backflip. I can't do a backflip. I'm 43 years old and that's just not something that's going to happen anymore. Possibly on trampoline, but no, not even really there if I'm honest. What I can do, however, is I can buy a backflip for my truck and install it. That's what we're going to do today. What we're going to do today is install a backflip tonneau cover on my 2018 Ram 2500 with Rambox. So this is the specific version of it that installs onto the side rails here, as opposed to having to have its own special rails added onto it. So I've got my instructions for it. We're going to go step by step through, and when we're done, we'll have a topper that I can use to keep my fifth wheel hitch and everything nice and secure when it rains. All right, so along with the cover itself, which is in the truck at the moment, the kit's going to come with a lot of various pieces. You've got your hardware that's going to hook it up. You have some insulation strips that had adhesive on the one side, some drain hoses, which are going to funnel the water from the cover down to the drains in the bed so that you don't get water seeping its way into your cargo areas. You have some insulation pieces that are going to run on the top of the rails, pockets for the drain hoses, specialized brackets which slide into these rails and attach to the cover, and then the instructions themselves. First thing we're going to do is along that front edge of the bulkhead, we're going to install this insulating kind of foam rubber. So they give you some isopropyl alcohol. Actually they don't, so I'm going to have to run inside and grab some, and just kind of wipe the rail down, and then we're going to cut that to length and just install it right across the top there, going from the edge of this plastic on the back all the way to the other side. A little hard to make out, but I've got my strip running all the way across. Get to the end here, cut off this excess so it ends nice and flush with this. Next step is going to be to pull the black caps off the ends of those rails so that we can take these tie down brackets out, and then we'll be able to start sliding the new hardware in and dealing with the insulation across the top. These pieces will come out pretty easy. There's a clip on the bottom, so just kind of push that up and then you'll be able to wiggle this free. All right, to remove the tie downs, just going to spin this all the way loose. And once that's loose, you'll be able to pull this towards you and it should slide. And take it all the way down to the end and out. Now that those are removed, we can apply the insulation to the tops of these rails. So you'll get two of these. If you look at them, there's a kind of character bump. That's by my thumb here. So you can see this little ridge. That ridge is going to go on the inside, so like that, so kind of in towards the bed. And these are going to run right along this top bar. So you want to first get some alcohol and kind of clean that off. And then they should give you something like this, which is an adhesion promoter. You just kind of rub that along as you go, and it should kind of clean that off. So clean off any of the grease first, let that dry, use this across the top, and then you should be good to go to stick this on. All right, so our weather stripping is installed. You can kind of see how it runs along this inner track. It's got this flap that overhangs the center rail but doesn't block it, so you can still use any of your accessories that use this top rail. You want to start at the cab on both ones, so on this one you'll have to kind of unwind it to start from the inside of the spool. When you work your way out, you'll have about this much material left over. You're just going to cut that off flush with the end of the rail. Okay, next we're going to deal with the mounting brackets. There are 10 of these, so you're going to do 5 per side. And all you're going to do is place them in here in the end of the rail and then slide them down. You're going to do 1 on each side to start. If they kind of bind up, just pull these little screws out and then they'll slide. But you're going to do 1 on each side, slide it all the way down to the end. They're all identical, doesn't matter which one you use. Okay, now with the mounting plate is all the way forward, we're going to deal with the mounting brackets. There's 1 of these per side. They mount with this tab towards the inside. So this is going to go as far forward as possible against the bed, and then you move the plate back so that it slots right over top of that. And then it's a 1/2 inch bolt that gets threaded in. So you want both the washer and the lock washer on the outside of this plate, and then you're going to run those in. I just finger tighten them, and then for me, I'm using a 1/2 inch ratcheting box wrench. You can use a regular socket set or just a regular box wrench if you like. Vertically on this plate, you're not going to go all the way down, that would seat too low. You want it up so that this is level with the edge of the rubber seal, so essentially level with the other track that's here, and that'll allow everything to seal up nice and tight together. Brackets secured on both sides. You're going to reinstall one tie down per side, slide it all the way to the front, and then go grab the backflip cover with it in its folded position. We're going to bring it out to the truck and set it in place. So we've got the backflip loosely placed, and before we move any further then, what we need to do is install these clips. These are what the tie down buckles are going to attach to when you're traveling in this position. So they get installed into those holes right here. So what you're going to do is flip this panel up, and then for each of the screws there's this little captive nut that goes in from the bottom. This sits then on top, and this will thread down just with a Phillips head screwdriver. All right, the next step's pretty important, is that's getting this thing aligned. So first of all, this small panel you can kind of fold up, and there are these two little guards. Just pull those off because those are going to block what we're about to do. And then you want to line this up so that this piece, this metal on the underside of this small panel, rests against the bulkhead here, and that this rubber insulation in this top part is overlapping with that. So you're going to get this lined up. I'm a little bit too far forward, so I'll slide it back a little bit. But you want it straight, and you want those lined up under there, and then we can deal with these bolts right here. So this edge against the front edge of the bulkhead on your bed. Once you're lined up, we can install this, which is going to hold the front of the cover in place on that mounting bracket. Now these come pre-assembled, so you'll see you've got kind of this large flat bolt, and then there's a couple little rubber gaskets, a metal washer, a lock washer, and this bolt. You're going to want to replicate that, so you're going to unthread this, the lock washer, the washer, and one of the rubber gaskets. Keep those in that order, and then you're going to drop this, the top flat washer, or top flat bolt rather, and one of the rubber gaskets through that hole. The rest is going to drop down through the mounting bracket, and then you'll go rubber gasket, metal washer, lock washer, and then this little screw cap. Tighten that up. All right, our elevator bolts are installed on both sides. Next, we're going to do the mounting point for the little bar that holds this in place when it's in its flipped up mode. So that's going to be this guy right here. So just like before, we're going to slide one of these mounting brackets in. This is going to mount like this, so with this shape facing up, just like it's shown here. And then you want this about 17 inches from the bulkhead so that the prop rod, which is that black guy right there, can connect into here and then hit into that little U-shaped fitting with some clearance, because this slides up and down. All right, I've got my standoff brackets in place. Essentially, where I ended up placing was about halfway between these two kind of detents that this rides on. That does force this to be captive here, but that's about where I usually have it anyway, so that's fine. And you can kind of see then the prop rod goes to here, and that gives us plenty of clearance so that can be slid down to engage with it and tightened, and we've got some ability for it to move both ways. I did that on both sides of the truck. Now our next step is going to be do the additional mounting brackets, and for these we're going to line them up with where these points land. So essentially you're going to pre-thread the bracket and use those little L-shaped guides, and we're going to just position them so that when this gets folded down, these click into it, and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, this first set of mounting brackets, if you're using the same spot for the pole supports that I use, it's going to have to be kind of right up next to it. And you're going to want this top edge to run level with the top edge of the metal bracket here, but below the rubber, because you want the panel to sit and not touch that bracket. You don't want it resting against it, or they'll vibrate and it'll kind of scratch this up. But you do want it close enough that when this closes, it'll latch. Got a nice solid latch right there. Those are engaged on both sides. Now removing this is as simple as down here, there's a cable. When you pull that down, it'll undo both sides simultaneously, so you can flip this back up. So first one's in place. So what we'll do is kind of work our way back. So for the next one, we'll place another mounting bracket in, run another support about where it's going to fall, get it lined up against the top, check our distance, tighten everything down, and then fold that panel down and do the same for the last one. So here's my second bracket. Just as a little cheat tip for you, The spacing on these is pretty much exactly 4 detents apart. So you've got the one right here next to my bracket, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that'll let the catch go straight in the middle of this block. All right, spacing on this last one is going to be way out near the end. This is going to be the final clip. There isn't actually a hole down on this middle panel. So you're going to take your tie down, slide that in somewhere, make sure it's in there before you put this clip in, and then get that positioned just like the last. You'll just have to fold out these panels a little bit more to figure out where that's going to fall at the end. Okay, we've got our supports all the way in, so it'll close completely. And then we just have a couple finishing steps. You've got these little brackets. These are kind of optional, but these install into the holes here. And they've got these little black clips, which will flex out, and from what I've seen online, break fairly quickly. And that's just to hold these poles. So essentially, you set them down so that these can click in, so these aren't rattling around in your box while you're driving. And then the last thing we'll have to do is install the drain cups. Drain cups are these pieces right here. One goes on this end of this rail, the other goes on the cab end of the same rail. And then there's a hose that runs to the drain hole in the box. So here and there. Those are sort of optional. If you don't install them, water's just going to dribble down inside. It's a question of how secure and watertight you want this to be when it's all said and done. I'm not overly concerned about it, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to snag those hoses pretty much every single time that I use the truck bed, so I may not actually install the drains. I will install these though, just to keep the prop rods out of the way. Last thing then, there's a couple pieces of tape and things that you want to undo. These clips have a pocket here so that the straps can stay nice and connected when you're not using them, and this strap is what holds the panel down when you're traveling like this, which I will when I'm using my 5th wheel, to stop it from catching the wind and flipping open, and to prevent me from having to have it open against the cab. The only other cleanup step then is there are a couple rails. It's those pieces right there, and those get installed on this edge of this panel. Make sure you install them far enough in so that they don't hit against the side of this when it's folded. But those are just cab protection rails, so that if you do have this folded up against the cab, vibration or anything like that isn't going to cause it to bang into your glass and break your glass out. So just one here and one on the other side. There's a third one if you want to put one in the middle. I won't, because I don't want it to interface with the hitch here. And there we have it, fully installed. Really like the fit and finish on how this looks closed. It's pretty tight all the way around. You can close the gate with this down. It's recommended to have this up just so the seals hit a little bit cleaner, but if you're willing to just kind of pop these out of the way, it's not a huge deal. Rambox still works. So that still opens and closes fully without affecting the seal at all. See that? Yeah, very nice. And the whole thing can be run from one side. So obviously you have to have the gate open to get started for security, but then there are those pull hatches. So you just keep folding it over and releasing the latches as you go. I'll tell you from reading online, one thing for longevity on this, it's very tempting when you have it fully folded up to just let it bang down, because there's a fair amount of weight as you're holding it. It's been recommended from what I've seen not to do that, because these panels are pretty thin aluminum with foam on the inside. It'll support 300 pounds if it's evenly distributed across the top, so you can use it as a bench essentially when it's folded. But you keep doing that, it's going to wear this panel out, and eventually they'll split and you start getting water in them. So just for longevity, ease this down and click it in, kind of the same thing with the others. Don't allow them to snap down into place. But other than that, pretty cool kit. I like it. So this being the end of a DIY dad video, I of course owe you a dad joke. And since we've been working on beds, what's the difference between how short people sleep and how tall people sleep? Simple. Tall people sleep longer. All right, remember, with any DIY project, it doesn't have to be perfect. Most important step is just to do it. Take care, stay safe, catch you on the next one.